SkepTalk on the line. It's what is the date today? We are October 2nd, and if you'd like to call in with a question or argument about, let's say, Mormonism or General Conference or ex-Mormon, if you like, we'll just make that the impromptu topic. And if you're calling from the U.S., the number would be 720-619-2288. Or if you'd like to call in from the web, you can find the link in the description. I'm Aron Ra, and joining me is Bryce Blankenagel. He is arguably, I think, probably the foremost critic of Mormon history. At least he seems to know more than anyone else about the formation of the Mormon foreman, if you like. The foreman of the Mormon? Bryce, how do you do, sir?
I'm fantastic. I'm excited to be here, and I not to dissuade you from heaping praise on your co-host, because that is always appreciated. There's a community of people who I revere, who I aspire to one day become within the space of Mormon studies. And after a long 30-40 year career in the studies of Joseph Smith and early Mormon history, maybe I'll consider myself somewhere on their level as far as critics of the church. But hey, got to start somewhere, and here I am. So I'm excited to be doing this tonight, though. This should be fun.
Respect your humility, and I also respect the fact that I had a 6-hour conversation with this man, and he impressed me with just how much he knew about the dark, seedy underbelly of the forming of the Mormon Church. And somebody, damn it, shut up, phone calls. Somebody really ought to make a movie about how the Mormon Church was formed, and just cleverly change the names. And I don't know if you would need necessarily to change the century, but maybe you could do it to cast the whole thing in modern day. But however you do it, just make sure everybody knows this is the forming of the Mormon Church. It's just different names. It's like when they came out with the highly. It's like when they did Nosferatu, but everybody knew it was Dracula. Just do that with Joseph Smith as the guy who runs the brothel for where the prostitutes kill his political opponents and then feed their bodies to the fishes while he's trying to overthrow the country with his militia, destroying the printing press to get out their own propaganda. That's
it's been done in video games.
Just make it. Just make it. Just make the series about the Nauvoo Church. Just make it. Somebody pony up and do it, and just smash through that the faithful Hollywood side has put in place from one of these series ever actually starting. Please just do it. Call me.
Have either of you played Far Cry 5?
Material. Yeah, Joseph Seed.
I was just saying, it's been done in video games. There's so much Joseph Smith overlap.
Oh yeah.
Okay, good to know. And I need to open up to calls to see if we can take some. Okay.
Still waiting on calls. We only opened the lines a few minutes ago, so currently no calls in. But we are lines are open. People, get your calls in and challenge these atheists. Turn them to God. Yeah. It's about time.
So this last weekend I was in Houston, where I had the opportunity to meet a couple of Satanists, a married couple who started out married in the temple. They were Mormons. And the story that I heard was that he had decided to investigate the origin of the Mormon Church. And this is before the CES letter, or the CS letter, I forget what it is, but it was before that. And he, in his own research, he comes up butkus. He's like, this is a bunch of crap. And so he was raised in the Mormon Church. He was married a Mormon in the temple, all that, and he has to keep his atheism a secret. And then when she finally confronts him about not having paid tithe in a while, he tries to explain himself, and she said, no, I can't put up with this. But then she decides to investigate it on her own. And in quite rapid order, she figures out it's full of shit. And so they're atheistic Satanists now.
I mean,
which I think
that's
is an
a
amusing
tale
story.
as old as time in the community and spaces I work in. I mean, I literally just came back from a lunch engagement with some listeners who had a similar story. I mean, they didn't appear to be practicing Satanists. However, one of them had become atheist and was living closeted atheist and just trying to keep the peace in the family, going to church every Sunday for like 2.5 years. And finally, a confrontation happened, and the partner, who was devout and in the church, began analyzing it, and it took them barely a month out. Right, so it's happening so much. The trends are the most reliable data that we have right now is from the Next Mormon Survey. Yeah, right. You see a black book right there, Next Mormon Survey, by Jenna Reese and Benjamin Knoll, and they were able to conclude that more than half of the younger generation is leaving the church before they even reach the age of 20, where they would have gone on missions. So yeah, it's a huge problem that you're leading out members. And I just finished watching General Conference, and this is an event that happens every 6 months in the church, where it's just 10 hours of sermons, an entire weekend, 10 hours worth of sermons of the leadership telling Mormons how to be the best Mormons they can possibly be. And it's abundantly clear that they recognize that they are bleeding members. They even said it in conference that more than half of the millennial or the younger generation are leaving. They said it over the pulpit, owning up to it honestly. Yeah, and the church is in a bad situation. And I have a lot of other conclusions to draw from General Conference, but I'm going to talk about that over on my show Glassbox Podcast. And that's not what this show is about. We're here for callers. We're here for theists. We're here for people who want to challenge us and spend some time kind of getting into the nitty gritty. So if you want to give us a call, that is at 1-720-619-2288 if you are a U.S. resident. We'd love to hear from you.
There's a pretty great call lined up if you're ready to go for it, Aron.
Sure, let's take it. Okay, so, it's not letting me get into that screen. Here we go. All right, so we're talking with Bob from California, who is a theist and a UFO whistleblower. All right, well, let's hear about that, Bob.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Hello. Doing well.
Yeah, this will probably be quick. I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on David Grush, the UFO whistleblower that recently came out.
Okay.
I just wanted to hear what you guys thought about it.
Oh, okay. What we thought.
It's very interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, I didn't follow the whole UFO thing.
Okay.
I was actually, I actually read the Q thinking you were a UFO whistleblower, and I was keen to hear from you. Tell me, what God do the aliens worship?
Say that one more time. Sorry.
I said, what God do the aliens worship? That was going to be my first question, but
that's a very good question. Oh no, I mean, I figured it'd be a quick call. I thought it was very interesting that he was he had to go under oath. So if he's lying, he goes to jail, which I think is pretty wild. But
what I haven't
the whole
seen,
Senate hearing on it.
Yeah, okay, you did. So fill me in, because I didn't watch any of it. I mean, there's one or two other things going on in the world today, and I've been kind of following those.
Oh yeah, no, I totally get it. Basically, he was saying that there was non-human biologics that crashed, and they had they were trying to reverse engineer UFO ships or whatever you want to call it. At first, I thought it was bullshit, but evidently he was a pretty high up guy in the military, I believe. So I just thought it was kind of crazy.
I'm
very changed my mind on the whole UFO thing.
So I did watch the Senate hearings for it and tried to kind of just formulate some conclusions that I could possibly draw from it. Specifically, the person who you're referencing, and I forget the names of the threes, the three that were there. We had the one that was a pilot who was witnessed the Tic Tac. Then we have. Fravor. Yes, Fravor. Yep, Fravor. I think. Yeah. Then the second one that was seated in the middle was the person who had collected the data and had issued the reports and was the whistleblower of it, and had attempted to put up through the chain of command complaints that that the information was being suppressed here. And then the third person. I can't remember what was terribly significant about that person in the Senate hearing. However, they strike me as far more enigmatic. However, the first two, so Fravor strikes me as a very sincere person that sincerely saw some kind of an unidentified phenomena and is simply reporting the information as he sees fit. He strikes me as someone, rolled an insight check on him, and he apparently he to me came across as very sincere. However, the whistleblower person himself that was seated in the middle during the Senate, the names are escaping me. I apologize for this. Did strike me as somebody who was very much less trustworthy, and I say less trustworthy because a few of the statements that he made they felt like they were deliberately like secretive, deliberately obfuscatory in order to try and engender a sense of mystery and wonder in what he was saying. And then when he continued to be pressed on questions, of course, the best answer that he had was that we can discuss that in a SCIF, secured location that doesn't have any interference. And look, and that's great. Like, I hope that the people who are on the committee are able to discuss with him in the SCIF, who's responsible for actually suppressing the evidence and stuff like that. However, that person came across to me as far less sincere than the other two deponents. That being said as well, right? So if we are talking about the phenomena of unidentified aerial phenomena, there's a large chasm between unidentified aerial phenomena and little green men. And we have to establish a fair link before we are able to establish that there is any non-biologic, non-terrestrial presence. If that information is available and this contact has been made, and it's in our best interest to keep that information secret or keep that information suppressed, I would like to understand the reasoning behind it. If the information is merely being trotted out as political theater, which is what the whole thing struck me as, then it was very effective at distracting a whole bunch of conspiracy theorists totally away from 15 other very important and crucial issues that are currently frontline in politics. So for that purpose, it definitely served what it was meant to do, and that was a political stunt.
That, and we know people like marine biologists who study mollusks and such, who then come away and make this declaration that octopus are extraterrestrial immigrants. And that was maybe a decade or so ago, but somebody published that shit. We know they're mollusks. They're unique among mollusks, yes, but then every mollusk is unique among mollusks, right? And they are pretty strange things. But it's not like they're not related to squids and snails. It's not like they came from outer space. So somebody was just telling a sensational story, and they got a bunch of hits on it for whatever publicity they were shooting for. And I worry that people who do these kind of extraterrestrial things for UFOs or whatever, they're doing much the same thing. I mean, I would entertain that it's possible. I wouldn't say that it's likely. And there's a number of probabilities that have to be overcome, but I'm open. I would like for there to be extraterrestrial biology involved in this. That would be fascinating. I just don't think it's likely. We would establish communication with other worlds through probes long before we sent anybody living. And I think anybody that's capable of interstellar travel is going to do the same thing.
Just so you know, the caller disconnected a couple minutes ago. I was waiting to see if he was going to, if Bob was going to come back. So Bob, the lines, while they continue their conversation, if you want to call back to finish the conversation about this or the fact that you were a theist, we'd love to have that conversation with you. But I'll let you two continue, just letting you know that we're waiting to see if Bob calls back.
Okay.
I will also share an anecdote I had. So we went and did a tour of the observatory in my town here at the college campus. It was a wonderful experience. They just have these open tour nights every week, and it was fun. We were in a fairly small group, maybe 12 people or so, and they had the observatory at this university. The telescope, the original telescope, is still standing there, and it was originally constructed in like 1887 or something to that effect. So I was able to look through a telescope that was a century and a half old and see Saturn, and it was remarkable. It was fun. It was fantastic, and it was really fun too because one of the astronomers, one of the astronomers who was working there, who was conducting the tour, was trying to field questions, of course, and I'm asking pointed questions about observing Saturn, about the moons, about what we were looking at and everything, and then somebody pipes up and asks a question about UFOs. And it's funny, this is an older guy, somebody who was I would think if he were not standing in a tour group of a bunch of people who are attending an academic tour, would probably be wearing his MAGA hat in any other context or setting. And he was like, what do you think about them aliens that the Senate's talking about right now? And it was amazing to watch the tour guide kind of clam up for a moment and think of like, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with this person? And essentially she said, well, I haven't seen any evidence of it personally. And if there is evidence, I would like to know about that. And then just kind of deflected away from the question. And the guy kept pressing her more and more to say something about this. And what I'm pointing to here is the how inextricably tied oftentimes alien belief is with conspiracy theory mindsets. And if all of science is led by this cabal of Soros-funded researchers that will write anything, then it's much easier to see a world where it's possible that the government, the big scary big brother government, is hiding evidence of UFOs, in which such a conspiracy would require literally millions of people to be in on the conspiracy, and all of them keeping their mouths shut about it. Is that possible? Sure. Is it likely? With each person you bring into a conspiracy, you exponentially decrease the chances that it remains secret. So the more people involved, the less likely it is to actually remain hidden away. And if it's part of the mindset that you have a complete and total distrust of science and scientists in general, I think it's more likely that you are willing to believe, or are more likely to get on the bandwagon of all scientists are lying. They're all government hacks. They're all trying to cover up everything. They're all lying to us. And I don't think that that's a very helpful mindset that gets us any closer to what if there is non-biologic, non-terrestrial matter in a government storehouse somewhere. A bunch of conspiracy mindset and people Naruto running at Area 51 is not going to help. That's not going to make the government any less reticent to share any of that information with the citizens. So, it's all about being productive.
My first question would be, you're going to be sending these people out, and why don't they just say hi? And why isn't there like a public announcement about it? And I hearken back to Jack Nicholson, and I think it was 1969, who said that it would be a devastating blow to our antiquated systems. So when he's talking about UFOs, when he says that the Nusians are mating with people in all walks of life and in an advisory capacity, and for once man will have godlike control of his own destiny, and he'll have a chance to transcend and to evolve with some equality for all. And it's one of my favorite lines about skepticism in old movies too, is because that's when Billy, the guy in Easy Rider, they're smoking a joint together in the woods when Jack Nicholson is talking all this crazy conspiracy theory crap. And Billy says, "Look, man, I said I saw lights in the sky. I didn't say I saw it working here." So they've been telling these stories. They've been telling these stories since the 1940s, ever since they had the idea that, hey, there could be life on other planets. People have been talking about, well, what if we've already been contacted by them? And then once we had some degree of, once we had an idea that space travel was possible, even when it hadn't been performed yet, but we know what to do, right? So just somebody get on top of a rocket ship, and who's going to do that? Well, I ain't going to do that, but it could be done, right? Then we've been talking about these extraterrestrials coming and visiting us already. But we don't think about, well, what would we do? How would we contact another world? How would we go explore another world? We do it with drones. We don't do it by shooting people off into space in bullets and hoping that they'll be okay.
Well, I mean, that's part of the overall mindset that goes into UFO and alien belief that we are in constant contact, right? Is that like, oh no, well, aliens have been here for thousands of years because there's these paintings from the 1300s of Jesus with a little UFO because aliens, right? Like the idea is that they made contact a long time ago, and that they have been shepherding, the aliens have been shepherding human civilization through its advancements for thousands of years. At least, one faction of UFO belief that's maybe a little bit deeper in the rabbit hole than many of the people who are watching the Senate hearings. But I don't think that that's a very good way of like, no, we would capture their probes before we would see them. It's like, oh no, well, they've been here for thousands of years, Aron. What are you talking about? They've been hiding in plain sight. You've probably interacted with 10 of them today.
I don't think Bob's calling back. There is another call, but lines are still open, people, if you want to call in. I will tell you, if we want to throw a challenge out, at the beginning of the call, I went ahead and asked in a poll, do you believe aliens have made contact with Earth? And a good 13% of people say yes. So if you'd like to call in, as long as you're not rude, it's not going to be a hostile conversation. I'm positive our host would love to hear why it is you believe aliens have contacted Earth, because now it's 14%. That's a pretty high number. We'd love to hear from somebody to defend the position that, yes, I do in fact believe aliens have made contact with Earth. Anyway.
Well, much like the authors of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy put down their subnote on the Earth as being harmless, and then after the invention of the nuclear bomb, they decided to change the category to mostly harmless. I think what happens to extraterrestrials when they come to visit this planet is if they came now, if they come 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, it might have been different. But if they come now, they would turn around, pack up. No, they're not allowed, or they're not ready to join the Galactic Alliance because they still think their world is flat.
I mean, it's entirely possible, right? But like, that is positing like our mentality and our understanding of like human structures and human systems, and like when we are making contacts with like untouched tribes that have, that are time capsules that live in the world today, that's viewing it as if aliens would approach us the way that we would approach maybe an alien civilization. There's no reason to believe that any of our like civilizational structures that we understand and we operate by in our social contracts have any sway anywhere other than Earth, right? So the general preservation of life, sure, and among communal species, that appears to be a universal principle from what we have observed of living creatures on Earth. But we haven't observed other societies and how they operate, let alone the Galactic Federation and how it operates, to know like what are even the criteria for approaching an untouched planet that has never been contacted before. Like, what are your responses? What are your contingency plans if the visitor is captured and then probed by the humans, and then do they send in the invasionary fleet? What moral systems we have today here on Earth likely don't map very well to the rest of the galaxy.
So, if just looking at the biological aspect of it, if I wanted to be an exobiologist, and I'm going to posit what kind of beings these would be, they would not be bipedal. They would not be approximately 6 foot tall. They wouldn't look like humans. They wouldn't be able to be. You wouldn't be able to hire an actor and put some makeup on them and have them play something on Star Trek. They would be a very different size, probably much smaller than us. They would probably, and I'm thinking most rationally, they would be more caterpillar-like, but with very dexterous forelimbs, because they do have to manipulate their environment. They have to be able to understand things. They have to be able to perform chemical experiments and everything. They may not have the independent intelligence that we normally depict of aliens. They might normally go with a sort of a hive mind kind of mentality. And I fully expect that they would think about everything very differently than we do. We have a tendency to think that if we built a robot, that the robot would see a pretty girl go by and raise one robot eyebrow, because we think about things in chemical terms, but we think that AI would too. That's why in Star Trek, Data had a crush on one of his crew members and they had sex. So, but aliens are not going to be mating with us, and they're not going to be thinking about anything the way that we do. So it would be like having a conversation. The only way we would actually know how aliens would think is in trying to have conversations with AI now. When you ask AI to produce an image and you explain what you want that image to be, and then what it produces is something so horrifically bizarre that you're like, no, that is not what I was talking about. That's where the difference would be, I think. I'm picturing something that is truly alien.
I mean, we can keep on this if we have other callers that are
take calls.
alien related.
Yep, let's take calls.
But there was another caller that was, yeah.
I've do have a theist on here. We're going to prioritize, and we're going to be talking with Jack in Arizona. Okay, tell us, Jack, what is the situation there? Hey, how you do?
Doing well.
I'm doing all right.
So, you think aliens exist?
Well, I need to preface that by saying that I think it's likely, given the size of the universe and just the vast number of likely habitable planets.
Yep. It'd be kind of a waste.
I don't think we've been able to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've
Especially
ever heard
if you as a theist, if you imagine that the universe was created by a god, and you want to argue any kind of anthropic principle or fine tuning, and to have one planet out of 11 jillion, exactly, that would be kind of a waste.
And but here's where I think I might differ. A lot of people believe that aliens are like trying to communicate with humans. I think if anything, we're probably like the dangerous species because we're so immature. Like, we've only been around for a few 100,000 years, and if there are alien species, it's likely that they may have been around for millions of years. So they probably have figured out how to deal with each other diplomatically. I think Carl Sagan pointed out that if an alien race is intelligent enough to get across the galaxy, they've probably stopped killing each other in war. So the fact that we haven't learned how to do that yet probably indicates that they're kind of looking at us and keeping us in like a bubble, just making sure we don't cause too much trouble. If we were outside
that's a fair
of the
assessment.
solar system, if we were outside of the solar system, and I think as soon as you gain the ability to travel between star systems, it's a different ballgame, but we're still thousands of years away from that, likely.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that. If you have the ability, who is it that has the ability in our species to do that? And when you divide the people up, you've got the people who think that the Earth is flat. You have the people who don't believe that there is an outer space. You have the people that are inwardly looking at their own at their own navels and not being able to understand a fucking thing. But the people who are figuring out how to go to space are the ones that have natural curiosity, and these are not the colonist types. These are not the people that are inclined toward violence and destruction. Yeah,
so
we haven't set foot on Mars.
That would be true. One thing.
Yeah,
and I think it's really interesting. It's kind of interesting though, the exponential pace of technology. Like the number of years between when we first flew, which was the early 1900s, the Wright brothers, and landing on the moon in the 60s is pretty remarkable.
You realize that we first flew 110 years ago.
I mean,
That's
that's
insane.
specifically winged powered propeller driven
Yeah.
flight. So I mean,
Yeah.
there were dirigibles and there were floating, like we were flying for hundreds of years before that. That was just the first like combustion powered winged flight.
But that's heavier than air. That's important. That's an important distinction. Landing on a place higher than where you took off, and having
Right.
your own, doing it under your own power. But exactly, it was 1903, 110 years ago.
So 1903 to the moon landings was 1969, was it?
Was it 1903? No, it would have been 120 years ago. I'll have to look it up. I think it was 1903.
But what year was the moon landings? Late
1969.
60s, right? Like 60.
Yep.
Yeah. So 1903 to about
120 years ago.
odd years.
Yeah.
But from flight to the moon. So if we budgeted, like if we didn't budget as a human race on war and we invested $1 trillion a year into science and technology, like getting to other planets or curing cancer or something like that, like I feel like if we had our priorities straight, we would have been already kind of colonizing other planets. But I feel like alien species likely have the capacity to exist among us without our detection. Like, if you look at the technology we have now, say compared to 1,000 years ago, it's like magic. Like the fact that I'm talking to you, you're thousands of miles away, and there's, I don't know how many people listening, it's kind of mind-blowing. It would try to explain the internet to someone, even 50 years ago would be very difficult. So I feel like 1,000 years from now, yeah, go ahead.
50 years ago, people thought it would be neat if you had a watch that could give you a video call. They thought video calls would be really, really neat. They didn't even know that you could do video porn calls. They hadn't even thought of that 50 years ago.
Somebody had thought of that. Somebody had thought of that. They just it didn't make the cut into Star Trek.
I feel like there's so much. Unfortunately, as a species, we were so good at creating technology without necessarily thinking it through first. So my concern is that our ability to create new technology will be outpaced by our wisdom. Like, we're getting really good at building technology, but we're not getting a lot wiser as a species.
Yeah, it would be nice if we had a more communal-based. We'd be more goal-oriented and more successful, I think, if we had more community-based, let's work together kind of ideas. And I see a lot of problems with people wanting to be ruggedly individualist. And while I don't necessarily see that individualism is inherently a problem, I mean, it is a fact that we can achieve practically anything we want to do if we work together on it. And then we have people that just refuse to work with anybody for any reason.
And it's interesting, even our tribalism can be almost weirdly effective. Like, the reason we got to the moon was to just give the middle finger to the Soviets. So,
yeah,
in a weird way,
I kind of want to.
We're kind of pulled by that. But go ahead.
So actually, I think that's an interesting kind of way to take this, Jack. I wonder if at this point you wouldn't be willing to give us something that you kind of assert as belief within this context or within the theism context, and maybe they're interrelated, that we can maybe kind of latch onto and see if there might be some disagreement or some friction. Because at this point, it's like, yeah, okay, so it's cool. We're hypothesizing and very much speculating about the existence of aliens, but that's the thing, is like there's no bedrock on this. So.
Yeah, I gotta throw in there that you're a theist.
Theory or belief.
Yeah, you're a theist. You're calling in to talk to a couple of atheists. We're essentially looking for something to debate about, and weirdly, we're agreeing on this highly controversial topic.
Well, where I think we'll find a lot of common ground, and then we can move on from there, is that tribalism, whether it be political, religious, we as human beings are really good at saying, well, I'm a Protestant, I'm a Catholic, so you need to die, or I'm a Muslim, I'm a Christian, you need to die, etc. I like the fact that you guys are having these conversations, and I deconverted from Christianity because I felt like Christianity in the American context is absolutely not at all seemingly to be aligned with what Jesus actually taught. And I had like a lot of religious trauma going through that. And so now I'm a theist still, but I reject a lot of dogma. And what I try and do is I try and take what makes sense and what most comports with reality, as far as I can tell, from the different philosophies and religions. Are you guys familiar with, if I had to get down to like one idea or main idea of philosophy, are you familiar with Alan Watts?
I've only seen snapshots and quotes from Alan Watts, never read anything that he's written.
I feel like he's one of those people where like a lot of people will hear maybe a quote or just a brief little speech. If you actually drill down and read what he writes, he started out actually as a Christian and started to study a lot of Eastern traditions, so like Buddhism, Taoism. I wouldn't say that I'm a Buddhist or a Taoist or anything like that. But when I actually read what he writes about it, it makes a lot of sense from the perspective of, rather than having like this dogmatic kind of set of principles that I apply to in, say, a Bible or a Quran or a Bhagavad Gita.
Hey, sorry, I'm gonna jump in here real quick, Jack. Hey, Jack, we're in a conversation right now that is 98% preamble. And every time I think you're about to get out of preamble, it goes into more preamble. So I'm just going to request.
Are you able to hear me now, Jimmy?
Yeah, something weird happened. The whole thing hiccuped. Let me get the caller back up.
Okay, yeah, we got a frozen Aron, but at least we got a snapshot of a beautiful snake to look at, so it's not all bad.
Ready to connect. Click connect to show now. You are connected as the host.
I'll let that finish its thing up. Yeah, let me get, I'm not sure what just happened.
So it looks like at least the stream is going. So, hey, everybody, still around with us. That's good news. Not sure exactly what shit the bed, but something happened.
Someone in the chat says Jimmy broke it.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, it's his show. He can break it if he wants to.
It must have happened somewhere here because we lost everything. The connection to the call. I even lost my connection to Shortcut. So there seemed to have been a minor hiccup. But let me get Jack back on the line for you. And I'll give, the aliens are trying to interfere. Jack, we've got you reconnected despite the aliens trying to take us out. Basically, I was just saying if we can skip preamble and just start with like, I do believe this, and here is why I believe this, and then have a conversation, because a lot of those details that are happening in the preamble, the relevant ones, will come out during the conversation. If we can just switch to a model like that.
Of course, and I apologize for the monologue.
Bro, I do it all the time.
My main idea.
Yeah, damn it! You're a theist. You're a theist. You call into a couple of atheists. How dare you be reasonable? That's not what we expect at all.
So my main idea is, it seems like all the religions of the world have a piece of the puzzle, but because they all come from different cultural contexts, I think it's best we analyze it, say, like a historian would. So we take all the religions and see what makes sense and what maybe is an outmoded thinking from the past. And I think Christianity has a piece of the puzzle, and so on and so forth. And I think Alan Watts and others, like Terence McKenna, I can list other people, but go ahead.
Okay, well, we'd be happy to argue whether Christianity has clue one. You know, we could have that argument, because I don't think they have a piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
And I mean, I hear this pretty frequently. In spaces that I work in, ex-Mormon spaces specifically, that Mormonism teaches very much that they are like the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. And like other religions all have pieces, but the gospel of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is where the true gospel is collected in totality and restored. So when people leave that, when members of that belief structure lose faith in that belief structure, then it can be very much firebrand, where it's like, oh, none of them are true. However, that oftentimes the belief is retained that, oh, well, there must be some nugget of truth in all of them. And I think that is a worthless exercise. Because you're grasping at things like all of these things, these religions are constructed by human minds trying to think harder than a human mind has the ability to actually think, and trying to grasp at things that are impossible to grasp, or trying to make sense with our tiny small mouth words of things that are ineffable and impossible for us to describe or grasp, and then just trying to explain those things away by saying, oh, well, all of them have some kind of a truth, doesn't get us anywhere. It's not a productive conversation. And
it's much more interesting.
If Buddhism has one little nugget of truth for you, and that is not a nugget of truth for somebody else, well, then that just means that you and that person think differently. Doesn't mean that y'all are following different calls.
Bryce is talking about how we're bringing up these. Bryce is bringing up how we're talking about. Okay, never mind. Go ahead.
So my response to that would be: have you guys heard of the metaphor of the blind man and the elephant?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
so I think that's
assuming
religion.
Right, and that's assuming that there is a truth, which interestingly also proves that all of the religions are wrong. It's assuming that there's a truth at the beginning, which is the first thing that's wrong about it. There's not a thing at the beginning. It's not like all these blind people are examining an elephant. One has the trunk, one has a leg, one has a tail, one has an ear, one has a tusk, and they all describe it differently. No, there's no elephant there. We have a bunch of people pretending that things are there that are not there.
Well, that's a statement. You're making now a positive claim when you say there is no elephant. In other words, you're saying there is no God. Now you're adopting a burden of proof. If you say, I don't accept the proposition that God exists, how can you prove
and I can meet
there's no God?
And I can meet it. First of all, there evidently is no God. And in science, in the practice of science, we're only talking about what is supported and what is not supported by evidence. And whatever is not supported by evidence does not warrant serious consideration. Come back when you've got something to show. Until then, we have nothing to talk about. But it's not just that there's no truth in any religion. It's that there is a hell of a lot of lies in all of them.
Okay, so the fact that there have been people who have been excellent at BSing and there's been varying degrees of bullshit in the religions.
Every one of them.
So I agree completely. But here's the thing. To basically say that is to say, okay, so let's throw out everything ever produced by a religious person ever as bullshit? Am I understanding
everything produced by a religious person? I mean, we have some nice architecture.
Religious beliefs. But what I'm saying though is, do we take all of their, say, like, we're not just looking at the claim there is a God or there is no God, right? Because I think anyone who makes the claim there is no God and I can prove it is equally as foolish as the person who says there is absolutely a God 100% and
I can meet my burden of proof. I can meet my burden of proof, but I don't do it absolutely. I don't do it absolutely.
What is the syllogism?
Again, I don't do it absolutely. If you want a syllogism, if you want to talk about something that is, if God exists outside of our reality, well, then he does not exist in reality. There's a syllogism for you. So the only way that you can have everything that is real, the cosmos, everything that we can verify to be true.
Circular. See, the problem with language is that it's inherently limited. See, when you say the word reality, you're invoking something in my brain that's probably very different than the way you're trying to communicate it. So every person that's listening to this call has their own internal conception of that word. And it's an English word, and there's thousands of languages. So for us to have one coherent concept of reality that we can communicate. So that's the problem. Like when we're trying to have a religious debate and you say anything outside of reality is not real, that seems very circular in its argumentation.
Okay, so what is real is real. Okay, I'll grant that what is real may seem secular or circular from your perspective. But you're the one that's arguing that what is not real is real.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is,
okay, then what is God? You're making an assertion that there is a God. I'm saying that we've had lots of people making these assertions. We understand what the assertions are based on. They started out as being magically endowed people, all the ancient gods, and then you compile a bunch of these gods together. You mix them with some elemental gods, like a volcano god, the air god, the sun god. You mix these together. Now you've got a composite god, but we're still worshiping elementals with superhuman abilities. With they're all magical anthropomorphic immortals, and now we've integrated in this other thing where we have an afterlife, which is based on the idea of a soul, which comes from the idea that we didn't know that air was particulate matter, but you would die if you can't breathe. So they got the idea that you have to breathe. The movement of air in and out of your mouth is what keeps you alive. That's the spirit of God. That's the breath of life. And now we've once we learned that air is a thing, we've disassociated that concept from that of a soul. So now we imagine that we have a soul in us, which does not exist.
So that's the God of the
that part
gaps,
is not.
right?
It's not just we don't have evidence of a soul right where there would be evidence if there was such a thing. It's that we have substantial evidence against the soul. So if we don't have a soul, and we don't, then most people's concept of God is already moved.
You're making a proof now, or you make a claim. You're making a claim that, here's another very difficult word is soul, right? So the problem with these types of conversations is we'll run through words like afterlife, soul, reality, objective reality, and we kind of make the implicit assumption that you and I are on the same page. But the idea is,
I'm
when
all
I think
about
of a soul,
defining my terms.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Here's the way I kind of look at it. When I think of a soul, and here's something that's very, very different between how a Christian looks at a God as this kind of anthropomorphic sky daddy that has a list of rules, as George Carlin would say, right? And that's the God I reject. Because I don't think, well, first of all, that doesn't make any sense, right? This idea of, a God that you piss off, like this all-powerful, all-seeing God.
Hey, Jack,
something wrong.
Jack, just a reminder, we don't really need more about the gods you don't believe in, just the ones you do. And maybe the two of you need to pick just one topic, like a soul. Here's why you believe and you don't. Hang on, Jack. Just wait a second. I'll finish and then I'll shut up. It might be better if the two of you pick just one topic, the three of you, the soul, why you believe and they don't, and go back and forth on that, because you're all jumping around, and basically at the appropriate moments where I think Aron would have shared, no, actually, here's why I don't believe in the soul. Now we're jumping to these other concepts, which is making it just seem like people are just asserting. And so why don't we stick to a topic, and let's not focus a lot on what you don't believe in, just what you do. That's all the note I have.
Thank you. So do you want to pick a topic? I'm open to talk about any one thing.
So you're a Christian. So it's not just that you believe in a deistic sort. Let me narrow it down. You can correct me if I get it wrong. So not only do you believe that if it's supernatural, it's magical. Magical equals supernatural. Supernatural equals magical is the same thing. So you believe that magic exists. You believe a specific form of magic exists, that being a god. So you believe in a deity. That's a magical, anthropomorphic, immortal. You believe in a specific one, not just a deistic God.
No.
You believe in the Christian version of God, which is detailed in the Bible. The Bible being a compilation of folk tales that we know to be false about most of the important stories. So where do you deviate from my description?
In just about every way, because you made the assertion that I'm a Christian. I'm not a Christian anymore because of shows like this. I stopped being a Christian. I couldn't give up theism completely because there's a number of reasons. I'm not going to get into it.
Oh, please.
Not necessarily just argument, but listen, I could give you multiple reasons, but I have
Give
to
us a
first
reason that
correct
you
the fact
believe that a soul exists. Just give us a reason that you
Or
believe that
do
a soul
you? Do
exists.
you
Because
believe a
this,
soul exists?
I mean, well, I think the reason why is because it's central, right? If there is a soul that is
Yeah.
separate from the body, then the soul comes from somewhere into the body and then leaves the body at death, right? So if there is no soul, then there's no reason to believe that there's anything outside of objective, tangible, we're talking in this reality, right?
Okay, the way I view it, and again, it seems like the impasse here is that you guys are very much used to debating Christians who have, again, this anthropomorphic, there's us and there's God.
Jack, you're doing it.
The way I
Jack,
view it is-
Jack, you're doing it.
Let
This is
me
preamble.
respond
Jack,
as simply
hang
as I
on.
can.
Hang on, Jack. His question was, just give us a reason you believe in the soul. You don't need to go into your psychological analysis of the debates they have. Just respond. Just do an honest one-to-one. They ask a question, you answer, and then you can ask a question back.
Okay.
That's the way to do it. Go ahead.
I had some very meaningful personal experiences that I could go into if I had time, but I don't think this is the appropriate. But what I wanted to say is I've had encounters with my own mortality, my own death. I have had encounters with psychedelics, with very deep states of meditation. There may very well not be a soul. I'm willing to acknowledge that my belief in a soul is not something I can prove with a syllogism. If I had to sum up my whole kind of belief, is that God is analogous to like an ocean and we're like waves on the ocean. Human beings are like a passing phenomena.
Jack, look,
lives.
an analogy is not a reason. An analogy is appropriate when you're using it to describe a concept that is tangible and is you're using it in order to communicate a concept. But an analogy is not evidence, right? So if you are believing because of specific brain states that you're in, whether that is being that you're stressed or you've had a scrape with death recently or you're on psychedelics, whatever the case is, if you're in a brain state that is susceptible to believing that a soul exists, okay, that's fine. But what is the reason that you were led to believe that a soul exists?
Not currently. I'd like to point out I'm not currently near death and I'm not currently on drugs. So I'd like to point that out. So just for clarification's sake. I feel like we take these conversations so seriously. Like, I really appreciate the fact that you guys are very
Good
direct
Lord,
in your
Jack,
questions.
stop it. He asked a
But what do
question.
you want from me? Like, you're trying to ask me
He
very
asked,
complicated
what is a
questions.
piece of evidence? And you went into, I'm not on drugs, I'm not whatever, and then started talking about what you think of the conversation so far. And I am over here about to pull my hair out. Please just engage each other directly. Thank you.
I will try my best. So again, it kind of gets to the point of language is very limited. The reasons why I believe are personal to me, and I'm not going to be able to convince you in a phone call. And I don't think that.
But I didn't ask you to. We
it.
didn't ask you to convince us. We asked what your reason was.
I gave you the reasons.
Okay, so
you had
all
a
right,
moment.
so Jack, I am somebody. I study the likelihood that psychedelics were involved in the early Joseph Smith Church in the early history of Mormonism, and of
And a
course
lot
that
of
is
other churches
involved.
too.
I think that's fair as well, right? The origins of sacrament, I think, is a fascinating history in and of itself. But in any case, right? So I'm somebody who is an atheist. I do not believe in the existence of a soul. However, I am capable of accessing those higher states of mind, those altered states of consciousness, where people typically feel that ego dissolution, where they feel type of connection with a larger consciousness. And these are the language that we use, the language pieces that we use, because, like you say, language is limited, right? I still remain an atheist having those experiences myself. So I don't have a reason to believe in it, even though I have had similar experiences to you. What reason do you have to believe in a soul?
So just so we're on the same page, what is your definition of soul?
He just gave
a soul. Look,
supernatural.
it is.
Let me help you with this. Okay, in my definition of a religion, which is not the way that the government defines religion, it's not.
I mean,
even the way,
Aron, hang on. He asked me a direct question, and this is a tangent, so I'm going to answer the question directly instead. A
Okay.
soul is something that must exist outside of the physical body, that pre-exists, that comes into the body, and then exits the body upon death. Because for that to exist, right, that needs to have a pre-existent space where it existed, that is not tangible, that is not physical, that is not measurable or whatever, right? It needs to have a space that it exists before the body, and needs to have a space after the body, right? So, and Mormonism has explanations for all these things, right? So, if that thing is there, if a soul exists, this is something that is measurable. Or at least
so how
there's
would
a reason to believe in it.
So how
you could weigh a body right before
scientifically?
death and after death. I mean, you could set up all sorts of measurements and systems to try and capture the essence of somebody as soon as they breathe their death rattle exiting their body, and we haven't had any of those.
What would
and
Sean
Carroll
gave specifically?
Sean Carroll gave a presentation wherein he shows a physics equation, and he's saying that this physics equation that he came up with is proof against the afterlife. You know, if there was such a thing, we would have found it by now. If there was some means of supernaturally animating and operating a body, and upon the death of the body, this aspect leaves. You can't just use it's supernatural, so it can't be detected, because that's just a fail-safe excuse. How does a supernatural essence operate the physical body, and why is it so inept at doing so when we know that drugs will change the personality, physical injuries to the brain will change the personality, it'll change the decisions that you make, it'll change the kind of person that you are, and the soul has absolutely nothing to do with any of these. So we know that the soul it has no capacity to function at all, where physical maladies and injuries and so forth can. So, as I was alluding to before, in my definition of religion, is a religion is a faith-based.
Are you taking that from? Like, what I'm trying to understand exactly what you're saying, because you're saying that we've scientifically proven. Here's the thing: like, evidence or absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
But we have evidence of absence. We have evidence of absence. We don't just have an absence of evidence. While it is true that we have an absence of evidence for souls, we have evidence for the absence of souls. And where that comes from is I've done a number of interviews with neurophilosophers, neuroscientists, neurosurgeons, and so forth. Several of them, Patricia Churchland, Daniel Dennett, at least a handful of neuroscientists, a couple of neurosurgeons, all of them unanimously saying that we have all of these incidents where you can change the personality, where a tumor can cause someone to be a pedophile, and then you remove the tumor and they're not a pedophile anymore. Or you can have a severance of the left and right hemispheres, and now you have where one half of the brain believes in God and the other half doesn't. So
I've heard of that. That's really interesting.
Yep.
Now I have a question.
Where are you going to send that guy to the hell? You're just going to send half of him to hell?
Okay, first of all, I don't want to get into it because it's a completely separate topic, but I don't think hell is a real thing. I think it was invented by the church. I think we can agree with
absolutely,
on that.
Yes.
But it was invented as a means of control, and I don't even think Jesus.
Absolutely, yes.
I think it was a mistranslation. A Sheol or Gehenna was referring to a garbage dump that they burned garbage. I don't think he was actually saying you'll burn in a pit of fire. That's Dante's Inferno. That's recent literature.
Exactly.
So anyway, we can
preaching
agree
to the
on
choir.
that. So let's.
Yep.
So yeah, where I want to go back to and ask you a question is, you've interviewed how many neuroscientists? Like 12, 24, 100?
No, as I said, I interviewed the neurophilosophers.
Are they unanimous across the whole study? Like, we are in our infancy of understanding.
No, Jack, no. You don't get to ask a question and interrupt the answer. Let him finish.
Apologize.
So I interviewed the two most famous neuroscientists. These were Patricia Churchland and Daniel Dennett. And then on top of that, I interviewed 4 neuroscientists and 2 neurosurgeons. So we've got a total of 8 people, and all of them are expressing evidence against the soul. Now, they're all talking about how there is no support, none whatsoever, for mind-body dualism. Daniel Dennett told me directly that there is no support for mind-body dualism either in neuroscience nor even in philosophy. There's no support for it at all. But then when I get into the neuroscience,
mind-body dualism.
yeah, but that's the idea that there's some essence of self. This goes back to my definition of religion, where religion is a faith-based belief system that posits the notion that a supernatural essence of self somehow survives the death of the physical body to continue on in some other form. Now, it can be reincarnation. It can be absorbed back into the oneness of the biosphere or whatever, to become one with everything like the Buddhists, or it can just go on to some heaven or hell kind of eternity. But in every case, it's an essence of self, a supernatural essence of self that survives the death of the physical form to continue on eternally, usually. And there's no support for that. As Sean Carroll gave in his presentation, there's no possibility for this thing to work, and that's important. There's no possibility for it. There's no room for it. There's no evidence of it, but we do have substantial evidence against it. And the evidence that I just listed had to do with the effects of drugs, the effects of injuries, and so forth, that if there was such a thing as a soul, then that soul would be able to maintain the conduct of that being regardless of the drugs or the tumor or the injury.
One thing that I would push back against is you say that the soul would maintain the conduct of the person. Yeah. What I don't necessarily think I ever made that claim that the soul has to be like this consistent entity. Of course.
Okay, so Jack, then I want to boil this down to a simple question, Jack. Is your soul influenced by the mechanical and chemical mechanisms inside your brain?
Absolutely. I think it's all interrelated.
So it's not supernatural.
Well, I don't know. Honestly, I'm not here's the thing that I have to acknowledge. You guys are way more educated about this than me. I'm absolutely, when it comes to neuroscience, like I've spoken to people who are not experts necessarily. Like when I was in university, I've spoken to neuroscience majors, but the field is incredibly complicated, and I've scratched the surface of it. Like I've heard of cases of people getting a nail in the head, and all of a sudden they go from being a really peaceful, kind person to a violent criminal. And my response to that is not to necessarily say, oh, I guess that means there's no soul. My response is, oh, okay, then it's likely interrelated. And I'm not positing I have proof that there's a soul.
Okay.
They're either
this is
just to be fair, that wasn't a nail in the head. That was closer to a bar of rebar through the entire head.
True.
Through the brain.
Correct.
So in any case, right? So
I want brain has an impact on your personality.
Hang on, let Bryce go.
Right. Okay, so I want to dig into this because I think there is a real question at the center here, right? So if your soul is influenced by the chemical reactions and everything that's going on in your brain, then can the things going on in your can your soul then influence the reactions in your brain?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you rephrase that?
Is it a reciprocal relationship, right? So your chemical reactions in your brain are influencing your soul. Does your soul influence your brain?
I would absolutely think so. I actually the reason why I believe this is I have a good friend who is a hospice nurse, and she says that there's a lot of really fascinating things that happen to the brain right before people die on a really consistent basis.
Okay. I want to keep digging and following this path if we can, right? So if this is an interworking relationship, then this is something that should be
Correct.
measurable, right? There should be practices that influence that we should be able to tweak the brain chemistry, influences the soul in one or another, right? By sticking probes in there, by shoving drugs in your brain, by whatever, then that can influence the soul, right?
Well, here's where I agree with you completely, and I would like
was
to
a yes
add
or no?
further. Yes. Now, because here's where we're in the infancy of that, right? We have psychiatric medication that can affect your moods. We have brain
No,
surgery.
this isn't. Look, Jack. This is a tangent. This is a tangent. Bryce was in the middle of a line of questioning, so let's just continue that.
Right. So if so is there anything that you can do to your soul that will influence your brain chemistry?
What do you mean?
Right. So we can put drugs. We can put drugs and stuff. We can put drugs and stuff into our brain. We can hit it with with electric probes that can influence our soul. Is there things that we can do to our soul that then influence our brain chemistry?
When you mean do to your soul, like what exactly?
That's what I'm driving towards right now.
Like,
because if
there is a soul
that is inextricably tied to the brain chemistry, then we should be able to test it. We should be able to measure it. We should be able to interrogate the existence of that and be able to understand, or at least observe or document, the influence that the soul is having on the brain chemistry. But all we ever see every time, Jack, every time as we go into studying the brain, all we ever see are mechanical processes. So where is the soul hiding?
Like a gear? Like if we could understand the brain sufficiently, it's like a really complicated watch. And if we turn this gear that way,
a watch is a constructed mechanical object. A brain is a chemical mechanical object. When I say it that way,
okay, so
but it's organic material. So there is no human-made analog that applies to any organic material. Those are fundamentally different things.
Okay, so let's say, I agree. I'm trying to think of an analogy that, like, because I'm not. When it comes to debate and when it comes to understanding science, you guys are miles ahead of me. I got to acknowledge that. But what I'm trying to understand, the question is, you're saying, is there a way we can tweak the soul that affects the brain? And I feel like we're getting into the field of things like psychedelics and things like that. Like, I feel like there are ways for us to tweak. I feel like when you look at psychedelics or the soul, you're kind of zooming out and changing the perspective of consciousness, right?
But psychedelics have a very, very somewhat well understood way that they operate brain chemistry, right? We can put somebody in a brain scan machine of some sort, whether EKG or whatever, and we can dose them with psychedelics, and we can see the activation of the brain sectors that are the mechanics behind what the drug is doing, right? So at the end of the day, when you are on psychedelics, that is still a chemical mechanical process.
Is it chemical?
Now, what you're thinking, what the person is perceiving,
chemical. It's chemical.
Okay, so here's where I feel like modern science kind of fails, and let me contrast it to how, say, like
be careful where you trod here.
Right? But here, so look at psychiatry. For the longest time in psychiatry, they've had this theory of chemical imbalance, depression, anxiety. Like, I personally have gone through the system, and I've been prescribed drug after drug after drug. And I know many people who have also experienced that. It can be effective for some people, but for many people like myself, I've struggled because the problem is we're still in the infancy of understanding how to manipulate brain states through chemicals, right? So to say that we're anywhere near sufficiently advanced in science with regard to the brain.
Look, all right. So Jack, you say that's just a presentist way to what you're saying about drugs and manipulating, being in the infancy of these things, like what you're stating is presentist in nature, right? So we have been doing brain scans, and we have been measuring blood samples and using spectroscopy to measure like toxicity levels for a very short period of time. Humans have been doing psychedelics and all sorts of drugs for tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of years, right? So we're not at
That's
the
where a lot of our
infancy
religions came
of
from.
these things are. Right, the stoned ape theory, right? You invoked the name of Terence McKenna, right? You understand the stoned ape theory, right? So if these things are purely chemical, if we are believing in a soul because of literal chemicals that we are ingesting and then feeling the effects of, but there are other people who don't believe in a soul that can ingest those things and have the same effect, then it's not actually evidence for a soul, is it?
But it's not the same effect, because here's what I find really interesting about psychedelics. I hear all the time.
The question was pertaining to what was your evidence of a soul? And first of all, maybe before we get the evidence of the soul, we should get your idea of what a soul is. Did we describe it correctly? Was it a supernatural aspect of self that survives the death of the physical body to continue on in some other form? Did we get that correct?
I think you pretty much got it correct, but the way I would look at it is kind of like what continues on. Like if we're a wave on the ocean, right? It's this idea of a human life is one experience of the universe, and in a way it's I'm not a good debater, and explaining your ideas in a way that makes sense to 100 or 200 or however many people is not a easy thing for me to accomplish. But
I don't want you to worry. I don't want you to be nervous about that there might be 100 or 200 people. I just want to let you know that there's well over 800 people watching you right now, listening to everything that you say.
Okay. Yeah. So the thing about these debates, and what I find particularly tricky is we're trying to...
Holy shit. There's no version of any thought that begins with the thing about these debates that is answering questions, taking things to skepticism, any of that. And Jack, I think what maybe has to start happening is before you say anything else, you probably need to start every time restating the question being asked to get your own brain on track. Again, mine goes all over the place. I'm not trying to shit on you for having that kind of brain. Right. So from now on, when it's your turn to talk, restate the question and go, and it'll help everyone, and just address the question. And then once you're done with that, if you have a thought or something you want to briefly share or a question to ask back, do that, please, Jack.
Okay. And I apologize. Let me restate the question, as I think, so you're trying to get down to what I believe a soul is. And I think the basic premise is correct. This idea that there is something that exists beyond our human physical experience. Believe that there is something beyond that.
Okay, so does your dog have a soul?
Is before we're born and after we die. My dog?
Yeah.
Which one? Because I've had some really shitty dogs and some really great dogs, so I don't know.
So
only good dogs have souls?
What? But I thought all dogs go to heaven.
I'm trying to bring some levity to this because I'm so all over the place.
This was the problem. This was the first problem I had with having a soul. Is if any living thing had a soul, then every living thing had a soul. Algae, bacteria, plants.
And Aron, let me go to the terminal question here, right? If I am somebody who takes psychedelics and you are somebody who takes psychedelics and we both take them in the same set and setting, the same stimuli around us, the same mindset that we are wanting to achieve the higher consciousness, we're wanting to blast off, whatever, right? You come off of that, you have what you term to be evidence, or what your experience was what you call as evidence for the existence of a soul. I have the same experience. I come down from it and I say that is not evidence for the existence of a soul. So what we have is two people having similar spiritual experiences. And I say spiritual, it's a very heavy term, but it's appropriate here. we have two people having a similar spiritual experience, but both of them are coming to obviously different conclusions about the existence of a soul. Therefore, that cannot be evidence that a soul exists.
So in order for something to be evidence, all people have to have a unanimous view of
No.
it?
Yeah, that's
No.
what we call facts. Those are called
No, no, no.
facts.
You
And
don't-
then
it
we
doesn't
take
have to
facts
be
and we
facts.
put them
They're not-
together and we turn them into theories.
No, I'm just kidding.
Let me help him out a little bit with this. It doesn't have to be that all people, even people who don't know what the fuck they're talking about, even reality denialists have to have a universal. No, it doesn't have to have a universal opinion about it. Evidence is a body of facts, and facts are objectively verifiable data. If I state that something is true and you don't believe me, we can both look it up and see that it is true. Now you understand that yes, you looked it up independently. Yes, this thing is true. Now we both understand that this thing is true, and this thing, the truth of this thing, indicates or concords with one available position or hypothesis over any other. For example, the fact that we humans are currently still now apes is a fact in evidence of evolution, right? So this fact, you cannot say, well, that's evidence of creation or that's evidence of God, because that fact is inconsistent with creationism and has nothing to do with Christianity. If you're a theistic evolutionist, well, that's still evolution. That's not in that same fact. Sometimes a fact can be true in both of two conflicting paradigms. And if the same fact would be true in either case, then it's not evidence of either one because it doesn't eliminate one or indicate the other. So the simplest definition of evidence is a fact. The simplest definition of evidence is a fact that indicates. So it has to point to one or the other.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Okay.
You cover a lot of ground, and it's tough for me to take it all in and respond. But if I understand you correctly, are you basically kind of going back to the core rules of logic of basically, identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, like those core tenets?
I wasn't going quite that basic. I wasn't going quite that basic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's my issue with that is I don't want to get into this idea of light being a wave and a particle depending on the context, because we take logic as a presupposition that because it works, right? We use logic because it's internally consistent. But let me try and go back to your point here. So you're talking, and you're basically asking, if you have to boil down the question you have for me to one sentence, what would it be?
What is your evidence of a soul? So what is the fact or body of facts that are positively indicative of and or exclusively concordant with the notion of there being a soul versus the notion of there not being a soul?
Concordant. What are my body of evidence? I'm not a researcher when it comes to neurophilosophy.
What bit of data that we can all verify to be true? What bit of data eliminates the idea, eliminates the not soul idea, and implies or indicates that there implies that a soul exists?
So the idea that in order for me to believe something, I have to 100% eliminate the other possibility.
You don't ever have to do anything. It never has to be 100%. That's a religious fallacy.
I'll never be 100%.
All right, Jack, stop.
It's the false dichotomy that it has to be 100% this or 100% not this. We work with reasonable levels of probability here. Is it more than 50% that way or less than 50% that way? Can you give me?
I would lean in the direction of soul, but I can't give you a 100% fact.
I didn't ask for a 100%. I asked for 51% versus 49%.
I'd like to suggest we actually go ahead. Now stop, Jack. I'd like to suggest Jack, I will let you answer just that when I'm done here. I'd like to suggest we wrap this call up because frankly, 40 minutes ago, you were asked what evidence you have for a soul. And 2 minutes ago, you were asked it again, which means we've gotten nowhere. And it's basically been 40 minutes of not answering the question. So if you want to have this you want to have a final response to Aron's thing, I think you need to go back and watch this call and really assess if you feel that you actually engaged in the exercise or if you did a lot of monologuing and a lot of dodging. Ask yourself that.
Okay.
It's whatever. But now you two have your final exchange. Let's please end this but within the next 2 minutes because we can't do this all night.
I'm sorry that this is dragged on. Okay, so let me just respond. When it comes to evidence of a soul, for me, it's what do I lean in the direction? What's 51% or more? So
The fact.
when I look at, sorry?
The fact. Evidence is a body of facts that indicate one position or eliminate another. What fact are you going on? Or body of thereof?
What? Okay. So I could go off a number of different things, but what I'm arguing
We
is
already
I
went
don't
off
have-
a number of different things. We already listed a whole long body. We had a long list of facts in evidence against the soul. So in all of the evidence that we already listed against the soul, I just want to remind you that against that weight of evidence that we already listed, all the different things that contradict their idea of being a soul, we still have an empty room. We have a scale, right? And here's all the stuff that we later learned for not being a soul. The plate is still empty for the facts of being a soul. Give me a fact to put on your side of the scale to imply a soul.
Okay. And do you accept someone's direct personal experience?
No, because that's not a fact.
Okay, but what I was going to bring up...
a fact is something that we have to be able to verify. It's objectively verifiable data. Objectively verifiable data.
You can go to any hospice and talk to any number of hospice nurses and say, what are the common symptoms of people as they're about to die?
All right, this is cyclical. We are not getting anywhere. I think, Jack, I think where we are...
I'll finish with my one sentence and then I'm done. A common phenomena people will say, and you could say this is the product of a malfunctioning brain.
Because you just Jack, you're done. Because you just said I'm just going to say my one sentence and done, and then you decided to start a comma that begins what is clearly a paragraph. The call is finished, Jack. Thank you for calling. Goodbye. Fucking Christ.
Thank you, Jack.
Jimmy, you were entirely too impatient with these people.
Impatient, sir. That call was the second iteration. There was 12 minutes, I think, before the blip, and then that call was 44 minutes. Okay, Aron. How long ago did you first ask him evidence for the soul?
And then we had to explain for 40 minutes what evidence means. And yeah, I've been through this round and round and round over and over again. Whoa, what I dreamed last night is not a fact? No, it's not. Right. I've had this conversation a few thousand times.
I was ready to fight you, Aron, calling me impatient. 40 minutes I've sat here. Anyway, you got one more call. If no other challengers call, and we've said only challenging calls, basically, theist and whatever would we pick up additionally, but otherwise, if no other calls, you got one more call.
I got to tell you, Jimmy, it's many a times that I get people contact me who want to have arguments with me that tell me I wouldn't last 5 minutes with them. And I say, call when I'm on SkepTalk. It completely open. You think you can, you think I wouldn't last? Because I get this message over and over. You wouldn't last 5 minutes with me. Okay, good. Let's prove that. Call when I'm on SkepTalk. Do they? Fucking never.
Yeah, predictable. I'll tell you what, soon I'll have for you a link you can send them with a form they can fill out to literally just debate you. And we'll get those going where anybody who sets that challenge down, okay, here's your form. If you want to do it, I will be restricted by the moderator. I won't be able to, whatever. It'll be a moderated debate and we can do it. And we'll call their bluffs. Hell yeah.
That would be outstanding. I get a lot of posturing, a lot of bluffing and puffing up. But, I have a bunch of snakes. I know how that game is played. Make yourself look big, flatten out your body, look like you're scarier than you are. And then when it comes down to it,
respect you, bro. I do respect you.
And then when it comes down to it, fisticuffs, it's all of a sudden, I haven't got no arms or legs.
Anyway, what's the evidence for the soul? Anyone? Any takers? Jack's trying to call back. You're not getting on. And I'm positive Morgan already probably knows that, the screener tonight. You're not getting back on tonight, Jack. You can call back another night. Feel free to go ahead and take Mary, and we'll see if any other challengers come. Otherwise, we'll do super chats after this. People, get your super chats in.
Yeah, and by the way, you also need to check out our Patreon page. That is www.patreon.com/call-the-line. We need all the help we can get. Please support. All right. Hey, Mary.
Hi, Aron and Bryce. My brain hurts after that last call. Really bad. I got to take a Tylenol now. Anyway,
and remember,
Aron,
that's the most reasonable Christian I've talked to in months.
Oh God, no. Aron, I watched your discussion with Benjamin from 3 weeks ago, and with the big Afro guy.
Oh yeah, that guy.
And I literally spit out my coffee when he said Jesus touched this woman who had a bleeding disorder and felt the power go out of him. And then you said, I've had women touch me and felt the power go out of me. And he said, well, you can put it like that. I was, yeah. But anyway, hon, I do have an evolution question.
All right.
I understand melanin content is dependent on the closer to the equator, the darker the skin for sun protection. And Caucasian women are more prone to osteoporosis due to a lack of vitamin D and the
Sorry, I'm talking to my dog.
Skin. I know. I have dogs too, so I may be yelling shut up in a minute too. But I understand Caucasian women have a higher risk of osteoporosis. And then, if I'm not mistaken, I think is the populations moved farther north. Their skin got paler, blonde hair. They needed more milk products, vitamin D products. But I'm curious about, I understand the melanin content and vitamin D absorption. But I'm curious about the differences in height differences and nose shape. Like Africans tend to have flatter, wider noses. Is that due to a drier climate? And then as you get in colder climates, people tended to get possibly taller and narrower noses and the lighter eyes, and then in Asian countries, the almond-shaped eyes. Do you have any data on that?
Some of the bit about, well, first of all, when you talk about the dark skin versus light skin, there are two different mutations that will take humans from a mid-tone brown to the super dark coloration. We had one that occurs in sub-Saharan Africans, some of them that will be, because Africa is the oldest population of people, and so they're the most genetically diverse. Basically, every trait that you find in people all over the world can be found in Africa, including different nose shapes and so forth. So I hesitate to generalize. I've seen indigenous African people with little skinny noses, Yeah, a lot of that
Okay.
happens. Yeah, but there is one mutation that happened in sub-Saharan Africans that turned them darker than brown, that turned them black, and a similar but different mutation occurred in Sri Lankans that turned them black. So they would have features that, to Western eyes, look more Caucasian, but black skin, which is weird because you expect to see with black skin, you expect to see, the traditional type of features that we normally associate with that. And when you meet a Sri Lankan, okay, well that's very different. Now I'm talking to a Caucasian person with black skin. And then it's not just that that the melanin is the way that you described it, and a lot of people do, it sounds like the default would be white, but it's not. The default is brown. And then there's another mutation that actually made us whiter, and that was both for Europeans and Asians. And then the epicanthal fold is a Asian specific trait that adapted. I think the story that it was a long time since I've read this one, but this one had to do with an adaptation to against snow blindness. I can't remember. It was too long ago, and because it was so long ago,
Oh.
I don't even know that it was valid. It was so long ago, so I don't want to quote things from decades ago. And I'm sure that this was from decades ago. So
Yeah.
but you do have people in Africa that will have that have freckles, that have blue eyes, that have straight hair, that have red hair. All of this occurs in African people. It's just that, like in cases of blue eyes and red hair, these are such recessive genes that in population mechanics they can't get very far. Now, as people moved out of Africa, now we have the founders effect, where you have a limited population, and the dominant gene pool doesn't have the influence that it once had when you have the small population escape. And so there are certain eccentricities, novel mutations, for example, that may be better expressed in that one group. And like for the group that went into Europe, for example, that might be why we have a prevalence for bone white skinned, freckled people with green eyes and red hair.
Right. And isn't red hair and green eyes the most rare of the
It
hair
is.
and eye color? Okay.
Yeah, it's like the most recessive. So if you if you were my wife is getting into the snake breeding thing, as you can probably tell by the enclosures behind us, and so they're always looking for that select rare morph, right? You get this set of genes and this set of genes, you pair them together, you roll the dice, and you hope for the best, cross your fingers, and you might get that genetic concoction that you were looking for. Yeah, with one out of your 24 babies. It's kind of like that when you do the red hair and the green eyes, that kind of combination of recessive and recessive. Jackpot, we got this. Now if we can just find a buyer.
Right. It's like my mom had dark brown eyes and dark hair, and my dad had green eyes and light hair. And two of us got green eyes and light hair. One brother got dark eyes and dark hair, and the other one got blue eyes. And it's like, okay.
Somebody pointed out one of my favorite jokes. Somebody in the chat pointed out one of my favorite jokes. But when you get red hair and green eyes, then they don't have a soul.
Okay, well, I'm not going to argue for a soul, please. I've heard enough about that. But okay, I appreciate that but what about the statue? If that's the right word, height differences. Like Asians tend to be shorter, and the almond eyes. What?
Some of that has to do with temperature, and some of it has to do with diet. Most of it is diet. So, like the Norse and the Dutch are both like famously tall people for Europeans, And then you have in Africa, of course, back in the day, back in the 1800s or whatever, it was the Zulu that were the tallest. I mean, you do have mutations that can have an effect in population mechanics, but it really, in order to maintain that, you have to have the diet that also works with it, and its environmental conditions. So it's in that sense, I guess it would be fair to say that it is epigenetic. So if you go back a century or so, the Norse and the Danes and the Zulu were all in a benefit of having optimal dietary and genetic conditions to be excessively tall.
Yeah, and also, like, if a Caucasian person has a child with an Asian person, the Asian gene, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, that's dominant, and the children are going to look more Asian.
I don't think that's true. I don't. Yeah, I have what would be called, I don't believe in the term race the way that it is used. Darwin would not have recognized this as a multiracial family, but by the modern colloquialism, my family would be considered multiracial. And there's a number of people in my family who are half Asian, but look fully white.
Okay.
So, yeah, so I'm not going to say that I would not say that the Asian trait is dominant. What the problem is it's a white cultural thing, that one drop rule, where if you have one drop of some other thing, then you're not pure white anymore. That's where a lot of that comes from. So, for the people,
and
the people in my
and discrimination and bigotry and
for
all
the people
that.
in my immediate family, there's people in my immediate family who are German, English, Scottish, and then they're also Vietnamese and Chinese. And when you cut it down, it cuts down the middle. They're half Asian and half European. But it all depends on what they look like as to what they can claim. So there are people in my family that can say that they are pure, that they can just call themselves white, and no one will ever question it. But there are other people who can't answer a form that way, because somebody's going to look at their eyes and say, and it'll be the sister of the one that they accept as white, but the sister's not, because the sister doesn't look it. Now the sister becomes Asian and not white. So we have big issues with these forms, because you're only allowed to select one, and I don't think that even if you could select multiple of them, I don't think it would be valid.
Yeah, I agree totally with that, because we're,
And for a lot of people didn't know, Eddie Van Halen was mostly Asian, but everybody thought he was white.
He was Dutch too, wasn't he? They spoke. Eddie and the drummer's brother spoke Dutch.
Van Halen, but he wasn't 6'5", was he?
Hey, I just want to point out we have the show's toward the end, and we've got one more Theist caller lined up, so I just want to encourage.
Okay.
All right. Thank you
answered my questions, Aron. Thank you, and good to meet you, Bryce. Love hearing you talk, and try to find out what the hell soul is. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much. All right. Good night. All right, I'm going to wait for the thing to show that call has dropped off, and then I'm going to try to join with Alexander.
Real quick before you do it,
hey,
I'm going to mute Alexander real quick. We'll bring you on in a second. Alexander did call last Wednesday, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of anticipation. Not only did they call, the question that they are asking, they have already had answered. But I'm happy to let you all take it and answer yourself. Do expect a frustrating young Earth creationist who...
is there any other kind?
Well, yeah, you'll see. But Alexander, you're on with Aron. I'm unmuting you now so you can ask the question you already had answered a week ago.
Okay.
Well, Jimmy, you don't have to be a bully like that, but I guess.
Okay, good night. Bye, buddy.
No,
All right, we're going to go on to the Super Chats. Fuck you. I give a fuck what you think about my production and what I fucking do here. But fact of the matter is, you already had your question answered. Let me see real quick if Amargan can tell me what this other call being screened is. Maybe we'll take it. Nah, it's already late. Fuck you in your fucking face if you think you're going to call in here and whine about me letting the host know that this monumental time waster is calling to have the exact same question answered. And by the way, his question, for anybody who wants to know, is how can we, he brought up the pig jaw. I think it was the jaw last time. How can we trust science when science has had liars in it sometimes? And now he wanted to know how we could trust evolutionary theory because there have been liars before on the basis of science.
Wait. I would love to have this guy on. How can we trust when he cannot name a single evolutionary scientist who ever lied in the act of promoting evolution over creationism, quote the lie verbatim and show how that we know that it is a lie? Cannot do it. No creationist can. Then, secondary challenge. Cannot name a single professional creationist who did not lie while promoting creationism over evolution. So creationism is entirely, absolutely nothing but liars. That's it. That's all. Not one truthful person, not one truth in it. Everything is frauds, falsehoods, and fallacies. That's it. Everything is a hunk of shit. And that's all. No honesty at all. No truth whatsoever versus the science. Whereas if anybody in science gets something wrong, the other scientists will turn on them like a pack of dogs.
Yeah, which that last part is what was pointed out to him. When there was a scam for a bone that was supposed to be a fossil that was supposed to be a part of a human that wasn't, I literally asked him last week when he called me, how did we find out it was a scam? And he's sitting here saying we shouldn't trust science when his answer was science is what uncovered that it was a scam. It was literally by doing science that we uncovered the scam. And so here he wanted to say, how can we trust evolutionary theory? But by the way, this is a person who believes
Jimmy,
that things are. Go ahead.
I would have had so much fun with him.
Yeah, that's why I was going to let the call on. But then he wanted to start all cunty with his, you don't have to bully me, and I don't fuck around, man. I'm not going to, if I'm already agreeing to let you waste time, I'm not going to let you also be a little bitch. So I'm sorry, Alexander, you're a little bitch. You can call back when you want to play by the rules next time, dipshit. Let's go on to Super Chats. Send your Super Chats of tributes. Otherwise, we have to sell the show to Alexander. We need those Super Chats. Otherwise, Alexander gets the show. Please.
All right. So, Bryce, you and I are going to read these in turn, are we?
Sure. Sounds great.
Okay.
All right. First one comes in. This is a Super Chat for $4.99 from Scott Phipps. Thank you so much, Scott. Says, hi, is it true that DNA mapping incorporates the Hebrew name of God? Where is the Y in GTCA? What? What?
Got me, man. I don't know where they read that.
All right. Yeah. So unless there is any more to that, then it is not true. That's all. That's my best answer.
Yep. But the Hebrew name of God is like a tetragrammaton, right? And never mind. So $10 from Pibblepunk. Aron, which are the most beginner-friendly snakes? Boas or ball pythons? Ball pythons are adorable, but I don't know if I want to deal with hunger strikes. Well, here's the thing with ball pythons. One, they never get big enough to impress anybody. And two, they're little bitches when it comes to time to feed them. They often go off their food for no apparent reason. Boas are a hell of a lot easier to deal with. Depends on what you get. The Argentine boa directly behind me that I was just playing with a few minutes ago, these are going to be, they're things that generally eat all the time. The one I have, they're super slow. They're really easy to manage. They have dog-like faces. They're adorable. And they're not going to be like racing across the room like some colubrids can be. So, I mean, they're so much easier to handle. If you want a starter snake, you find a boa that doesn't have like super ridiculous humidity or temperature requirements. Get a BCI or an Argentine like I've got back here. And those will suit you just fine. These will get up to 10 feet, but it takes 20 years to get there because they grow slow, about a foot a year. So there's the answer to that.
Would you like to hear? I don't know why that question came up, but there is a Quora question that is the exact same question, word for word. Is it true that DNA mapping incorporates the Hebrew name of God? Do you want to hear what the answer on Quora was?
Please, yes,
absolutely.
So the Quranic answer, that's funnier to say, Quranic. So the Quranic answer was yes, ATGC is being held by sulfuric bridges. They have a repeating pattern and found at 10, 5, 6, and 5 again. 10, 5, 6, 5 are the numbers corresponding to letters of God in Hebrew. Look up the Hebrew alphabet. First two letters of Hebrew alphabet and several other languages like Greek, English, Romance language is YHVH. It's been revealed in the book of Moses. This is a tetragrammaton.
Brilliant.
All right.
Yahweh confirmed.
Look, all right. Cool. There's correlation between the numbers that are used by ancient Hebrews and the numbers and letters that are used by geneticists. That does not imply causation. And I mean, also, like, this is one of those things.
Every
like,
street light
I don't understand.
Every street light you come to is a 4-way intersection. Every street light proves God.
There you go.
Careful, you're going to summon the 7-day guy.
I mean, I didn't comment on the previous question too, because like, I don't know anything about genetics. Like I only have the most layperson's like 7th grade understanding of evolution. And when lay people comment on DNA and evolution, it's like, they're always treading a very fine line of dipping into eugenics. And I'm like, I'm just shutting up for this. Cause like, I know I'm going to sound at best like an idiot.
I like that somebody in the chat, put in the genetic codon number, GACT. Yeah, because God's name is Gact. All right. So what's our next chat, Bryce?
Real quick, just again to the people who are watching. This show's going to be over real soon, and we're going to have to sell the show to Alexander because we've not had a single additional super chat question or comment so get them in right now. Otherwise, Alexander gets the show.
Please save us from Alexander, please. All right, this is coming in super chat $4.99 from Garcia Bruckner. Thank you very much, Garcia Bruckner. Crotalis Cerastis. What words did I just read? What is happening? Any thoughts? What is? Is this a reference?
I would prescribe Thorazine.
Hang on, I'm going to Google it.
What is happening? What is happening? I feel like the one idiot in the room who doesn't get the joke.
No, I don't get it either. I just threw one out there. I didn't bother to Google it. That doesn't look like a species name. That is the Sidewinder snake. Sidewinder. I'm embarrassed. I should have known that one.
I got to be honest. I'm pretty embarrassed you didn't know it too. I don't want to just sit here and shame you, but I say we sit with this for 2 whole minutes.
And just let me think about what I've done, right?
Send a super chat of $5 or more berating Aron for not recognizing the Sidewinder species name.
You brought shame against your house, shame against your donkey.
$5 each. Got them in.
Right, $5 from the Raven 200. I love seeing Bryce on the show. Very cool and knowledgeable. Jimmy, go take a sunset flip power bomb through a flaming table. Aron, your snakes rule. Why, thank you.
Thank you, Raven 200. The Raven 200. Sorry to misname you. All right, next one. This one comes in $10 from Pibblepunk, the apistivist. Thank you very much, Pibblepunk. They say an additional $10 for our host's incredible patience. Doing what y'all do takes a specialized skill set. Very impressive.
Thank you very kindly.
Thank you.
$10 from Alan Conklin. Congrats, Aron, on the new monitor. Yeah, getting ready to breed feeder mice for my purple tegu and wondering how long before inbreeding becomes a problem. My wife and I had a discussion about the monitor, and I don't have a monitor anymore. Sadly, she has experience. She knows what these things turn into. I bought it without much discussion, and I promised her it wouldn't be a big deal. But Nile monitors are notorious as bad pets. The bite is excessively bad. And when they bite you, eventually they will. They have an anticoagulant saliva, and it's like glass shards dripping in venom. It's not a good thing. So I conceded. Yes, you're right, honey. I'll take it back. It was a wholly irresponsible thing. It would have been harder to take care of that one lizard by itself than it is for me to take care of the 60 snakes. It would have been that much difficulty.
I've just gotten word from Alexander. His plans to change the show are, first, he will be turning all round elements to flat elements, and he will be separating all hosts from their cameras by a firmament. So you're gonna y'all want to get those super chats in now, otherwise we are fucked. Did the round flat joke not make sense? I thought it made sense. Did it not? Sorry.
We could turn beans into peas.
I was just implying he's a flat earther. He's turning all the round elements to flat. That was the joke that I now have explained and made it funnier.
Oh yes, that's what happens. Bryce?
All right, $5 from Simon Belmont. Thank you, Simon. That says, what's the best response to say to people when they tell me to have a blessed day and I want to puke all over them? That's the right response.
Well, I remind people what a blessing is. It's the positive form of a magical enchantment, the negative form being a curse. So when people tell me to have a blessed day, they're literally telling me to have a magically enchanted day.
They must want you to eat some Lucky Charms.
$5 from Unapologetically Chrissy. Save the show from Alexander. Don't forget to like.
Boom. Like and subscribe the line. Y'all, have you done that yet? We have way more subscribers than we have viewers, so I assume all of you have, of course, because y'all are the best viewers. But, in case some of you missed it. Or save the show from Alexander, because we're just going to sit here in stunned silence and wait, because we don't want to hand it off to him.
Analytics say that it's about 40% of people watch that don't subscribe. And I call that 40% of people assholes. It costs you nothing, and it's not even going to ruin your algorithm except for maybe 2 days. And then YouTube's going to you're either going to click more because you want to or not, and then YouTube's going to pretend whether you made the choice or not doesn't matter. But if we hit 100,000, right now we're sitting at like 97.6, we can get verified, which also comes with shorter lines when we need YouTube to intercede and help us and when things go wrong and bad. And we want that verification. Also, it makes us stick out when I go to other live chats to antagonize people. And that's nice as well.
Look, one of your hosts just subscribed to it who hadn't subscribed before. If one of the hosts did it, the viewers can do it too, right?
God damn it, Aron, you weren't subscribed.
He said one. He didn't self-identify is what I think is the problem. $5 from Douglas, Maine. Any thoughts on emerald tree boa? Yeah. No. For whatever reason, although boas and pythons are more distantly related than most people think, when the word tree is in there, they're very, very similar in that they're bitey. They're beautiful. They're iridescent green. They're wonderful, both the tree pythons and the tree boas, but they're bitey. Strange habit written into both of their codes.
So, Aron, just in case anybody's watching is ever attacked by a wild constrictor, and let's say it's a very strong one, what would your first tactic to getting out of its hold be?
Friends assistance.
let's say that they were having a midlife crisis and they went to live in the Brazilian jungle. Now they have a Burmese python, which obviously it was a stupid thing to say, I'm realizing, that must have been released from a nearby pet owner, let's say.
Oh, so it's just as likely they're in Florida.
Yes, let's say that they're in Florida and they just murdered their girlfriend in Utah. And they've gone to the swamps because this happened. Now that guy killed himself. It would have been more fun if he had gotten killed by a constrictor.
By a Burmese python.
Indeed. Let's say that's the situation. First of all, in that scenario, we don't want the person to survive because fuck that guy. I don't care if he's dead. But let's say it was somebody who doesn't deserve to die. How are you getting out of the hold if you don't think you can necessarily overpower it?
Yeah, a week or so ago, my wife and I had the privilege of holding a 12-foot or 13-foot reticulated python. And this was a very heavy girl. And if it wanted to constrict us both, it could have done both of us. And because we're in a room with 100 people, I'm sure we would have gotten out of it. But had it been the two of us alone with a 13-foot, 100-pound retic over our shoulders, if it wanted to close in on us, we would both be done for. If it got both of us, if it just wrapped both of us, we're both done.
Well, that's not the exercise I thought we were doing. I thought we were going to take people who are terrified of snakes and go, don't worry, a finger in the cloaca gets them to let go every time. Turns out, nope, just remember your loved ones and have a happy thought as you die.
With the big snakes like that, it's like every 6 feet requires another adult human supervisor. $10 from
fun
Gleason.
fact, right before you die is the only time that you have the social excuse to shit your pants and nobody will know if it happened before or after you die.
Yeah.
So take advantage of the opportunity. Just seize the day. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, begin masturbating to see if you come before you go.
Oh my God, thrill yourself before you kill yourself. Absolutely.
One of the earlier callers today mentioned this thing that thing that happens to the human brain just before you die, which is an interesting study of rats that were being euthanized with all these brain probes, and they noted that after the heart stops, for 30 seconds or so after the heart stops, the brain goes into hyper consciousness in rats. So rats are all having near-death experiences as the brain is deprived of oxygen, is trying to rationalize some way of routing power from other systems to try to keep itself alive. So this is something that happens in non-human animals just as much as it happens in people. I just wanted
rats
to throw
have soul, Aron.
Purely chemical, as you pointed out yourself this evening.
Mechanically chemical, because I'm an idiot.
Yeah. So $10 from Calacia 789. Here's some 'cause I wanna.
That's a reference to another show we do on the line sometimes called 'Cause I Wanna. Sort of an impromptu show.
$5 from Zach W. Parker. Is Aron's snake okay from last week?
Yeah, remarkably, the snake is fine. Aron's fucked up. So to help people along with this, one of my wife's boas had gotten out of its enclosure, had figured out how to move the sliding glass door open. And they're all locked now, but we didn't expect as the snake was going to figure this out. The snake figured it out, and it climbed up to the top of the curtains. So I'm reaching up to the top of the curtains, and there's stuff in the way that I can't move out of the way, so I have to lean over forward, which I ended up having to lean on the glass just a little bit to unwrap the snake from the curtain rod way up over my head. And at some point, the window shattered, and I went through it, and I got a huge 4-inch gash in my arm, so deep that you could see through my arm into the muscle. I cut this finger off for the third time in the same place. So I now have 3 amputation scars crisscrossing each other, all on the same finger. And then I fell against the windowsill, and I think I broke a rib. It hasn't been X-rayed, but it's been causing me severe pain all day, and I broke my toe at the same time because when the window fell and all my weight was on my toe, suddenly my toe snapped. So blood everywhere, and I'm a complete wreck. So, yeah, but the snake was fine.
Still cute though.
1999 from Bobby Jenko. Hey guys, a Christian that I know has said that he's heard people say that they are no longer gay because of Christian faith. They lie. I don't buy it, but how would you refute that? It's hard to say what someone's thoughts are, you know? Well, I've heard a lot of women say that they go through like a lesbian phase that they eventually come out of, and maybe that's a thing that women do. I don't think that men go through that so much. Probably.
What? Are you serious?
No,
I
women don't go. It's sexuality is fluid, and there's more of a social acceptance for that kind of thing, which is why there's a higher occurrence of it. But people do still tend to have a preference, even bisexual people like myself, for one style of relationship, and it is most common that feminine people generally like to counter their femininity with a masculine partner. That's the most common type of final sort of relationship. So that's what the actual answer is. But Aron hasn't been gay since 1972 and forgot.
Yeah, Aron is one of those weird ones. I have the opinion that probably most people are to some degree bisexual, and I'm one of the odd ones out in that I'm not.
That could
So
be. Sexuality is a spectrum, and it could also be that if you were just raised in a different part of, because it's not even a point on a spectrum, it's more like a zone. And it could be that if you were just raised in a world that wasn't expecting everyone to categorically, and then you so comfortably fell into where you are, literally just make your birth 60 years in the future, it may be that it is so fluid that you could be gay as fuck next time around without changing anything else significantly about yourself.
Yeah. One of the things that I would tell people, I remember like in the 80s when people would they like to throw out the gay insult and everything. And I remember countering that if I was gay, you'd all know it. I mean, I'd be so open about it. I would have no problem with it. And you all know that. So
look how open he is about being a space pirate. I mean, what I see his day-to-day dress. I see the clothes he wears every day. I'm just saying, this would not be a quiet gay.
Bryce, I think this one's yours.
All right, plenty to say on that previous question. We will move on. $5 from Mark Fernkopf. Thank you, Mark. It says, Aron, when and where were you active in the SC? Also, from the bottom of my heart, go fuck yourself, Jimmy.
When was I active in the SCA? It was in the 80s, mostly in Atenveld. In the Outlands, mostly in the Outlands, but also in the Kingdom of Atenveld.
Okay, every now and then someone says something, and they don't pay for it, but I'm willing to read it on air. And this is one of those times. As Nice Story Bro has written, I'm bisexual, sorta. I just haven't found a woman with a banging body in the face of Rob Lowe in the 80s. Still looking. I just want to share that. That's a very specific part of the spectrum.
Well, and that's kind of what the direction I was going to go. And usually that people are maybe generally attracted to certain genders, but also like people are far more often attracted to individuals, and those individuals can be all sort of and never mind. It doesn't matter.
My wife likes to make fun of me.
If that's your thing, if that's the exact thing that you're looking for, I hope you find exactly what you're looking for, and that person is exactly the same amount into you or even more.
I do want to say, I know for a fact that Bryce believes this because he constantly reminds me it wouldn't matter if he was gay, straight, or bi. He doesn't like me.
But my wife likes
to you deleted those
make
texts.
Fun of me. Because I was telling the story about how unfair it is that the rich and famous don't have the same rules as everybody else. So Vince Neil of Motley Crue, in a drunk driving accident, kills the drummer for Hanoi Rocks because they're going like 180 in a 35-mile-an-hour zone while drunk, right? So Vince Neil spends 30 days in a private jail cell where he has no roommate because he can afford a super fantastic lawyer. And I'm thinking about how unjust this is. And so I show up a picture, which I wish I could share because the audience would so understand what I mean. If you look up a picture of Vince Neil from Motley Crue from the Shout at the Devil series, just imagine you're in jail and you find out that this is going to be your roommate and your cellmate, right? So I post this picture, and my wife constantly makes fun of my homosexuality when it comes to Vince Neil, specifically from Shout at the Devil.
But I'll introduce you to people if you want to find the rest of your homosexuality. I guarantee you they'll find it. I know gays you can't even conceive of.
Is this yours,
Is
Bryce?
that yours? I can't remember. Sure. All right. From $4.99 from Ben9 Lives. I don't know whether that is a name or is that a message. I don't know what that Ben9 Lives.
Ben 10
Ben 9 Lives,
is a
thank you.
cartoon. So I assume that this means that they think Ben 9 is some parody. I don't know.
I thought it was past tense for he has lived. It's been 9 lives, and now he has to face mortality.
So Ben is a cat.
Yes. $5 from Skeptics and Scoundrels. A correlation is when you read Cora and brain cells die.
That's true.
All right. $5 from Andy Placeris says, great show. It seems like all the theists cherry pick from all the God to make their arguments, but don't defend their own God most of the time. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. It was nailing down Jello. Just real fucking squirrely.
I've been debating in an app called Big Screen on VR, like almost every night. I've been going in there and finding people in these theist rooms to debate. And that is the most common thing I notice is when they want to defend the existence of God, they go with the very similar arguments that at best you could say, if they were correct, could get you to deism. And they don't seem to understand the monumental gap between their defense that God exists and that Jesus Christ has holes in his hands he can masturbate with. They don't seem to realize how far a bridge they need to cover. I didn't say he does, by the way. I only said he could, and you believe God's all-powerful, so how dare you say he couldn't?
And I just realized that Jesus could double hand.
Oh, yeah? Could? Almost certainly does.
It feels like impractical. Like it's just a lot of extra muscle groups that you're moving. Like you'd be limited on speed is my thing.
For now, but the current standard posture, what else do you use that in life? You're not hauling ropes off of a boat.
This is God. He is omnipotent. He can take whatever positions with himself he wants. You know what? I'm sorry I put God in that little tiny box.
He gave us ball joints on our shoulders for a reason. To ball.
He could wish lips onto one of those holes.
It's not by wishes. Now you're being ridiculous.
That's not how God does things.
It's a magic spell, you condescending jerk. You don't have to bully us like this.
$4.99 from Gary Bennett. Thank you very much, Gary.
Gary. 5 from Kai Cook Daniels. I'm just chatting because I'm finally here live. I can't stand the repeat offender theist, but it's a dirty, guilty pleasure. That's, I think, why we're all here.
There's 2 or 3 of you that have been here since day one. I haven't even been here since day one. What the fuck is wrong with you? But thank you, and I love you, and I depend on you to keep showing up.
Right? There we go.
Is it mine or yours? I forget. Oh, yeah, it's addressing me, so I'll read it. $10 from Thomas Garman. Aron, how many lizards do you keep? Have you ever looked at getting into the more reasonable Ackie monitors? Also, binging the Naked Mormonism podcast. It's excellent. Fuck you, Jimmy, with love. You rock. My wife has 2 leopard geckos. I was going to have an ornate Nile monitor, but my wife showed me the practical reasons why I should not have a Nile monitor. And I've already had a Malaysian water monitor until the police shot it. And it also, there's a lot of horror story with that. They're not, monitor lizards in general are not a good idea. The Aki monitors I've heard are recommended, but the ones that I like, unfortunately, I like only because they're horrible flesh shredding machines, and there's just something about the evil incarnate that appeals to me.
No, I actually get that. But please tell me that there is a video on your channel titled "The Police Shot My Monitor Lizard." Because if there is not, you don't understand the algorithm at all.
Yeah, this was 1987, and it was the summer of 87, and unfortunately that wasn't the case. But I can tell you this. I was in the Weekly World News, and later, because of that story, there was a TV show that was doing an expose on the Weekly World News, and they asked the people, did they ever do research on the stories that they talked about? And there was this guy that said, well, we never actually researched any of them, but there was one that he knew was true, which was this guy in the Midwest, because that's where I was in the time, who had this giant monitor lizard, and the police shot it, and they did the title, "Police Do Battle with Giant Prehistoric Reptiles." So I'm the one true story in the Weekly World News.
All of this could be on a video that would be highly consumed, 1 million views, and you just have to title it you could go with "Police Shot My Pet Dinosaur," "Police Shot My Pet Monitor Lizard," "Police whatever." And then you just tell the story for 10 minutes.
Boy.
Jesus. I have watched that video, and I don't consume YouTube almost at all.
All right, $5 from Grant Sarber. I'd love a rant from you both about one of the animals in the Book of Mormon that we have evidence against having been in the Americas then.
Well, he wants a rant from both of us. The only animal I can think of course, is that there were no horses, unless you want to put this in South America and trade horses for tapirs, and then we've already understood what a phallic nightmare riding tapirs into battle is, with their 5-headed, 5-foot long
that
penises.
Elephant trunk between their legs with an elbow.
Prehensile. Yeah. Y'all are missing a lot over on Joseph Smith Barnes' show. We're having good fun over there. My choice is Curulams. What the fuck is a Curulam? I'm sorry. The apologists have said that it was clearly mammoths because there were mammoths in America in 600 BCE. It's just like the word is made up. The apologetic tries to we don't actually know what it means, and
it doesn't. It doesn't even sound like a real animal. Like if you ever watch Rick and Morty, they make up a lot of nonsense words like gagoos, glip glops, bobbish. It sounds like that. Curulam. It's a Curulam. We just added the letter Q to ancient Reformed Egyptian. Curulam.
And apparently its cousin species, the Cumom, Curulams and Cumoms, right? Is that what they are?
I think so.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. And they're like, oh, that's just mammoths and slightly smaller mammoths that are hairless.
Curamom goes to college. The I would say honeybees, but maybe honeybees do best come over from one country to another via wooden submarine. I don't know.
We all live in a wooden submarine. $5 from Kai Cook Daniels. By the way, I have 2 balls, pythons, and one went on hunger strike, and it definitely freaked me out for a bit. So they were rescues, so I didn't have any experience. Yeah, well. Yeah. Balls are like that.
Sometimes they're also just picky. I had a ball python in the past that would only eat, I can't remember, I think it would only eat white rats, but not brown rats. So racist. I had a racist ball python.
$10 in from Pibblepunk, the apistivist. I'm sorry. Aron, have you ever had a super dwarf retic? If they weren't so expensive, would that be a good option for a first-time snake owner? Also, glad you still have your fingers.
Well, most of them. I still have most of them.
Gotta stop showing that to the camera. We're gonna have to put a fucking notice on the episode. That thing is fucking gnarly. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Okay, so what was it? No, I haven't had a dwarf retic. What I decided on was the dwarf retics were super fucking expensive. But if I get a male, even if I get a male mainland, then they're roughly half the size. And so I'm expecting that my male will be 9 feet long. He'll only be 9 feet long when he's 2 years old. Now, there is a chance that he'll continue growing until, when he's 10 years old, he'll be 16 feet at the same time that I'll be 70. So that could be a problem eventually, but we'll get there.
So what's the worst snake for a beginner?
I would not get you don't get a retic as a beginner snake. Retics
but what's
are gigantic.
The worst snake for a beginner? Or let's just say
Baboon viper.
It's like, vipers have such pretty heads on them. I want to get one.
They do. Yeah, and there's some elapids. I know a guy's got 40 snakes, and he's got mostly vipers and elapids. I mean, he's got cobras and bush adders and that sort of thing. So anything deadly venomous is obviously not a good idea. But
Let's be real.
I know that
you knew that guy. I don't think you know him anymore.
And then $5 from Robin Webster. Can't deal with the flat earther line producer.
Mm-hmm.
So the same guy also insisted that there was, I'm trying to remember which guy it was, but it's basically one of the Answer in Genesis was it an astrophysicist or was it it might have been a cosmologist, insisted that guy had said the cliche phrase about if the earth was even an inch closer to the sun, we'd burn up, or an inch farther away, we would freeze. And not only did I tell him he was wrong about it, and he agreed with the elliptical nature of our orbit, because this is referring to Alexander again, he still then went back and started defending that was true. And do you know what it's like to be forced to defend a flat earther, quote unquote, scientist, because you know that there's no way that scientist actually said something that stupid just because he believes that the earth is 6,000 years old? That you're going to put me in that position, you fucking asshole. I don't regret hanging up on you, dick.
$4.99 from Des Frylock. Thank you so much. It says, I had a Colombian red-tailed boa for my first snake, Jacques. I had a red-tailed boa as well. It was great. Got him as a rescue animal. Question: what is your best and haircut you ever had?
There's no such thing as a good haircut. Just avoid them.
Well, I'd like to have sex again at some point in my life, so I disagree. I will be cutting my hair. It is not sustainable in its current spot.
And I'm trying to hang on to every little fucking strand that I got for as long as I can. Hanging on to this till they scream and cry bloody murder.
I grew up in the 80s where long hair was at least popular, and it got me laid a lot.
I'm in that middle zone where my hair's not short and it's not in the good looking long zones. And so I either have to shit or get off the pot. Bryce, you should grow yours out like the principal from Freaks and Geeks.
I don't know that reference, but if you're talking about the UFO head, I've considered it.
And then $4.99 from Ben 9 Lives, or it's Ben 9 Lives, I don't know. Keep hearing about new exotic pets, jumping spiders. Aron, what do you think? You can buy jumping spiders at most herp conventions for like maybe $30. The problem is they only live about 5 years, but they're cute.
Or you can walk outside, you weirdos. They are everywhere.
These are big. These are the ones as big as your fingernail.
I thought you were about to tell me my hand. There are ones bigger than my fingernail in my backyard right now. My thumbnail. These,
Well,
my
you have to be
goodness.
able to name. You have to be able to name the species and more, for it doesn't count for anything.
Okay, Mr. Sidewinder. Oh.
Hydrodonestes gigas.
You
Spilodius
set me up.
pilatus.
That was your own fault. You did that to yourself.
I know some snakes. I don't know all snakes. All right. Bryce, go ahead and read this one.
All right, $5 from Grant Sarber. Thank you, Grant. It says, Bryce, I want your vegan brownie recipe. Hashtag Eli had it coming. Also, I got a favor, and the only cure is more Mon hidden history. Insert Bryce coin. That was a super chat to only Bryce, and thank you so much, Grant. I expect a check coming in the mail. Jimmy, no, you cannot have my vegan brownie recipe. It was very, very special. Eli did not have it coming. It was actually he was unwitting or he was unaware of the situation. Unfortunately, let's just say some information got lost in translation, and I bear most responsibility for it. Yeah. Thank you for inserting the Bryce coins.
What will you tell which egg substitute you use?
It wasn't so much the egg substitute as the oil substitute that I think was is the question here.
Okay, that one then. Will you do that?
Let me see.
Do you know some vegans use applesauce?
That actually sounds really good. I bet that would give it like a nice dynamic, like savory flavor. That sounds delicious.
It might, but it
I
seriously
cannot
looks
remember
like
what I
an
used.
oily dump. Like it has no fluff when you use applesauce.
Yeah,
Reminds
but
me of
like
Cheech
if
and
it tastes
Chong.
good, like
Yeah, Cheech and Chong talking about Santa Claus and his old lady. Yeah, she made the best brownies. I could eat one of them.
Yeah.
Oh, I get it. Weed. Okay.
Oh, so, all right, yeah. Well, that's the backstory. I guess I probably should have said something about the backstory. Scathing Atheist, sorry, God Awful Movies, the Puzzle in a Thunderstorm crew went and did a live God Awful Movies in Seattle when I was living there, and I thought it would be fun just because like it was where I was living, and I was like, hey, yeah, cool, welcome to Seattle. So I made a batch of brownies for the whole crew, and like walked over and here you go, guys, enjoy. One of the hosts later found out that they were Seattle brownies.
So Bryce has just admitted to a felony.
I told the person I was handing it to. Like I said, it was lost in translation. I bear only, I think, like most of the responsibility.
Well, okay, I don't know why you said lost in translation. You should have told him in English, Bryce.
$4.99 from Microskeptic. Aron, do you have a Daisy peltis gansi, African egg-eating snake? If so, how many eggs do you feed them a week? I just got one in July. Her name is Debbie. My wife has an African egg-eating snake. And if something were to happen to my wife and I were to adopt all of her snakes in addition to my own, that one would be the first one I'd get rid of because I have no idea. I've got a refrigerator with a bunch of quail eggs in it. I have no idea what the feeding schedule is on this thing. I've never fed it. I don't know what to do with it. So
don't die, Lalandra. Hey, were you gonna thank Microskeptic for including the common name?
I do thank you for that. Yes, because I'm obviously handicapped.
I'll give you this. I am never letting this go.
All right, $5 from the Raven 200 butts.
Counterpoint. Counterpoint. Oh wait, actually, Jen got it. Hang on, 1 second. I don't need to do this. I'm waiting for it to load into my system. Jesus Christ, refresh already. There we go. This is the counterpoint.
$5 from I Got Cookies. Boobs.
There we go.
We won't take a poll this time, but maybe next.
All right.
Yeah, I'm just going to have to immediately and rapidly Google the Latin name for every species that is mentioned even peripherally on this show or others where Jimmy is involved.
Yeah, you better fucking believe it. You're going to want to make flashcards, my friend.
Yes, I'm currently looking up Tipiridae.
Bryce, why don't you tell people where they can find you and also DM me the links because I forgot to put them. I just realized.
For sure. So yeah, I am a host of Naked Mormonism podcast. It's a serialized history of Joseph Smith's church, and I also that's currently on hiatus. But I also do the Glassbox podcast, which is the current events show that I do with my co-host Shannon Grover, and we also enjoy reading through the Book of Mormon on the Aron Ra's YouTube channel on the series called Joseph Smith, and that's a barrel of laughs. Even when Jimmy shows up, we still try and have the most fun we possibly can. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Whatever. When I'm not there, so-and-so gets to just read without interruption. Everybody shut up. We're only here to read the book.
It's so boring.
No, he's a sweet guy. I mean, I assume yesterday's episode went great. Just kidding.
We didn't have an episode yesterday. I was
that worked out.
I was in Houston giving a speech on the paleo or the evolution of the paleontology of whales, which will be up on my channel probably tomorrow.
We've got one more super chat, and then we will run the outro of patrons. But remind everybody to go to patreon.com and become a patron, or else. Just or else.
He'll bombard the entire planet with comments. $5 from JC. Bryce, glad to see you survived another Gen Con. This never Mo. Looking forward to the GBB review. Did you catch that creationist nod woven in?
Creationist nod? No, I did not catch that. All right, so Gen Con, General Conference, talked about that earlier, but we do a review of it every time on Glassbox Podcast because nobody wants to listen to 10 hours of old fuddy-duddy fucks talking about Mormon shit, but they'll listen to 6 hours of Shannon and I talking about that shit. So no, JC, please get in touch with me. The creationist nod, I did not catch that. It's hard to stay attentive for 10 hours of lectures from these non-engineerians. So yeah, a lot slipped through. Please send it to me. Please let me know. I wanna know more.
All right, hasta la pasta y biased nachos.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.